The self, identity, and personality. First, I just want to give a quick overview of what we mean by each of these things so that you have a sense of what this chapter is about. When we say the self, we're talking about all the characteristics of a person, their existence and understanding of themselves as a separate and unique human being. Identity refers to who a person is. This is an integration and a synthesis of all the person's self-understanding. Think of all the things you associate with who you are: your job, your gender, your religion, your ethnicity, and so on. Personality encompasses our sense of self and identity. It's our enduring personal characteristics as an individual that runs through everything we do and everything we are. First, we're going to start with a discussion of the self. How do we conceptualize and develop a sense of self and others? The first signs that we see that we are beginning to develop a sense of self-understanding comes around a year and a half old. Self-awareness is demonstrated when toddlers go from thinking that the baby in the mirror is another baby to recognizing that they are looking at themselves. How do we know this? With something called the Rouge Test. In the Rouge Test, an adult casually puts a little dot of color on the baby's nose without the child noticing that that's what they did. Then they put the child in front of a mirror. Before 15 months, the child notices the dot and touches the mirror in an attempt to touch the dot on the other baby's nose. Between 18 months and their second birthday, though, the child will look in the mirror, see the dot, and touch his or her own nose. They've become aware that they are looking at themselves. In early childhood, remember this is preschoolers, children's sense of self-understanding primarily consists of physical descriptions and actions. If you ask a preschooler to describe themselves, they might give a concrete example such as, "I live in a big house," or "I can run fast." They might give physical descriptions such as, "I'm different from Jennifer because I have brown hair and she has blonde hair," or "He has a bicycle and I don't." They give active descriptions like games that they like to play. And they give unrealistically positive overestimations such as, "I'm never scared," even though that's not actually true. Around 4 or 5 years old, young children also begin adding in psychological traits, both for themselves and others. So they might say things like, "I'm nice," or "My teacher is nice." They also start understanding that people don't always tell the truth. Remember, this is when they start developing theory of mind, so they understand that people have their own thoughts and feelings, and that they might not share those thoughts and feelings with us. However, even though they know that people don't always tell the truth, they are easily persuaded to believe someone if that person seems nice. That's why they can so easily be led away by a stranger who acts nice, shows you their cute dog, and asks you if you want to go look at their other dog too. So even if you train your child not to go with strangers, you still have to watch them carefully because that wiring just isn't quite complete yet. But they're getting better. And the more you talk about intentions, goals, thoughts, and feelings, the more that you'll improve your child's understanding of them. Children's self-understanding becomes more complex during middle and late childhood. For one thing, they start to describe themselves in terms of psychological traits and characteristics, such as popular, helpful, mean, smart, or dumb. They start to include social descriptions in their self-description, such as being in scouts or being a member of a particular religion. Their understanding increasingly includes references to social comparison. They think about what they can do in comparison with others, which makes sense because now they're in school and they can get a sense of how well they do at certain subjects compared to others, and how well they do at certain activities at recess compared to others. They also become more realistic about their self-evaluations and do a better job of distinguishing between who they are versus who they wish they were. Socially, it's very important that children develop perspective taking. Perspective taking is the ability to assume another person's perspective and understand his or her thoughts and feelings. With theory of mind, you know that someone else has different thoughts and feelings as you, but perspective taking takes it a step further and involves understanding and sympathizing with others who are distressed or in need. Recent research indicates that children and adolescents who do not have good perspective taking skills are more likely to have difficulty in peer relationships and to engage in more aggressive and oppositional behavior. When you're not good at putting yourself in another person's shoes, you can kind of act like a jerk. Adolescents start to add more abstract and idealistic descriptions when describing themselves. They might say things like, I don't really know who I am, or I'm indecisive. They're a bit more self conscious and tend to think about their self understanding more than other ages because of the self preoccupation associated with adolescent egocentrism. They're able to handle and think about contradictions within the self, such as I am both moody and understanding, or I am both introverted and fun loving. For a while, their self understanding can fluctuate. After all, they're going through a lot of changes physically, neurologically, and socially. So their sense of who they are is kind of shifting until they construct a more unified theory of self later in adolescence or early adulthood. Finally, because adolescents are in the formal operational stage and can now consider hypothetical situations, they start to develop possible selves. These are versions of themselves that they either hope to become or fear to become. They can envision a future in which they get into a good college and have a successful career. They can also envision a future in which they don't get into college or can't get a job. A study of adolescents in Hong Kong found that adolescents who feel like that they have pragmatic support, such as if I need to know something about the world, I can ask my parents. They have positive selves that were more focused on career and school, and they were more likely to think that they could attain their hoped for possible selves and avoid their feared possible selves. As individuals transition to adolescence and adulthood, they engage in more self-reflection about what they want to do with their lives. You may have experienced this as you try to decide on a major or think of potential careers you'd be interested in. Self-awareness becomes more important in adulthood. Lack of self-awareness can ruin jobs and relationships because a person isn't aware that he or she is a bad listener or doesn't use good problem-solving strategies or acts aggressively rather than assertively when trying to resolve conflicts. It's important to be aware of both your strengths and weaknesses so that you can address the weaknesses. High self-esteem and positive self-concept are important characteristics of children's and adults' well-being. Self-esteem refers to global or overall evaluations of the self. It's also sometimes referred to as self-worth or self-image. It's your general sense of, am I a good or worthy person? By contrast, self-concept is more linked to a specific domain, such as whether you're a good student, a good athlete, good looking, etc. Self-esteem seems to be highest in childhood, drops in adolescence, gradually increases through early and middle adulthood, and then drops again in the 70s and 80s. Why does it drop like that towards the end? Explanations include deteriorating physical health and negative societal attitudes towards older adults. Being widowed, institutionalized, or physically impaired, having low religious commitment, and experiencing a decline in health are all linked with low self-esteem. A current concern is that too many of today's college students grew up receiving empty praise and as a consequence have inflated self-esteem. Too often they were given praise or rewards for performance that was mediocre or even poor. Although the intention behind things like participation trophies is to make everyone feel good about themselves, this tactic actually backfires. Inflated praise may cause children with low self-esteem to actively avoid important learning experiences, such as tackling challenging tasks. When they grow up and go to college or enter the workforce, people who have learned to expect praise regardless of performance experience difficulty handling competition and criticism. They might feel like they are being singled out or persecuted when told that they need to do a better job instead of viewing it as an opportunity for personal growth. So, what is the right way to build self esteem? One strategy is to identify the causes of low self esteem and what areas of competence are important to you. We're not all going to be good at everything. What do you value? Focus on mastering those domains. Another strategy is to provide emotional support and opportunities for social approval. Some children come from homes that don't offer any emotional support. As a teacher, coach, or other adult, you can be an alternative source of support. Someone who says, I know that you're capable of these things if you work hard, and I will be here to support you in your efforts. If you are the one struggling with low self-esteem, take responsibility for your feelings. Work toward achieving goals. Strong self-esteem comes from repeatedly setting goals for yourself and completing intermediate tasks to accomplish those goals. A fifth strategy is to develop effective coping strategies. Self-esteem often increases when individuals face a problem and try to cope with it rather than avoid it. When you cope with something effectively, you face your problems realistically, honestly, and non-defensively. You tell yourself things like, I should have prepared better for the test. Next time I'll make sure I go to tutoring and get together with my study group. When you cope ineffectively, you trigger feelings of denial, deception, and avoidance. Those things don't help you build competence and therefore do nothing to help you build your self-esteem either. Self-regulation is the ability to control one's behavior without having to rely on others for help. We talked about emotional regulation in the last chapter, and emotional regulation is one aspect of self-regulation. As infants, we completely rely on caregivers to tell us when to do something or not to do something, like, no, don't touch that. As preschoolers, we start to get a rudimentary sense of self-regulation, such as not touching something that we know we're not supposed to touch, even if we're not being watched. There are limits to it, though. A preschooler may know that they're not supposed to go out into the street, but a strong stimulus such as chasing a ball that has rolled into the street or spotting a favorite friend across the street will often override everything else. As we move into childhood and adolescence, our self-regulation abilities improve, especially a key component of self-regulation called effortful control. Effortful control involves inhibiting impulses and not engaging in destructive behavior, focusing and maintaining attention despite distractions, and starting and completing tasks that have long-term value, even if they may seem unpleasant. Self-control plays an important role in older adults' quality of life. Even though older adults experience a decline in certain physical and cognitive skills, they can help buffer themselves from problems related to those if they maintain a flexible, accommodating control style. Selective optimization with compensation theory states that individuals can produce new resources and allocate them effectively to tasks that they want to master. Selection has to do with keeping some goals and letting go of others. Older adults have a reduced capacity and loss of functioning, so you just can't do everything that you used to be able to do. You pick your battles and focus on reaching just your most important goals. Optimization suggests that it is possible to maintain performance in some areas through continued practice and the use of new technologies. So whatever you choose to do, you work hard at it in order to maintain your abilities. You're optimizing your performance. So you might do a crossword puzzle to maintain memory skills, or exercise to maintain muscle tone. Finally, compensation becomes relevant when life tasks require a capacity that goes beyond the adult's current potential. For example, it takes you longer to process information, so you might drive more slowly, stick to familiar routes, or stop driving at night. By focusing on only your most important goals and making the most out of your choices, selective optimization with compensation is how you take charge of your physical, social, and emotional well-being.